Anna is an artist and researcher based in Mengen, Australia. Her work and PhD research investigates how art practices can contribute to the creation of safe and brave spaces for dialogue in aged care. She's interested in applying storytelling as a crucial tool for vocalizing visions and ideas of aged care workers and residents. Her artwork has been awarded the Visual Studies Workshop Offsite Residency Award, the Libris Artist Book Prize, the SLQ Singanto Foundation Fellowship, the AAANZ Best Book Award, the APPA Silver Award with Distinction, the Ian Turnbull Memorial Award, and a commended award by the Australian Photo Book Award of the Year. So she has quite a number of accolades. Her work is well reputed in Australia and around the world. And without further ado, I will hand over to Anna.
Thank you, Adele. Thanks for the introduction. Can you hear me okay? All good? Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you all for being here. It's very kind of you to take the time. I want to also begin by doing acknowledgement of country. I want to acknowledge the Turrbal and Jagera people as the original owners and custodians of the land on which I live and work and on which I'm standing today in Mengen, Brisbane. I acknowledge that colonial structures and policies remain in place. Ongoing nations people living within those structures. I acknowledge that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples are the first healers and have been caring for sick ones on country for over 60,000 years. I extend my deep respects to the elders, past and present. I'm just going to make a personal note. My girls are listening to me, but I can hear you. Girls, can you please turn down the volume? Thank you. For those who don't know me, my name is Anna. I'm an artist and I do research in aged care. I'm about to finish my PhD through the School of Humanities here at Griffith. And today I want to talk to you about well, some ideas, but also some examples of what happens when people in aged care get together to share stories. I love stories. I am a storyteller. I love reading stories. I love sharing stories, but particularly I love listening to stories. Since I came from Mexico to live in 2010, so that's 14 years ago, most of my work has been about spending a lot of time with other people in their homes and in aged care, basically just having conversation, listening to their stories, writing them down, photographing them, and then sharing those stories to my community. I believe that stories are important, not just as a final outcome or as a historical record, but I'm particularly interested in the sharing, in the moment when we get together and we share parts of who we are, how we think, what we believe in, and the things that we have experienced in our lives. Many times, wonderful things happen when we do this. So wonderful things happen when we get together, and these things happen inside of the teller or of both. I read research proving scientifically how good relationships help to regulate negative emotions and to reduce stress. There is a chemical component related to human closeness, and I'm not talking here about romantic relationships or just physical touch. I'm talking about when there's a genuine connection with another person, when we feel truly seen and heard and understood. In these moments, our brains tell our bodies that we can relax, like, hey, you can relax, you're safe. And research shows that the more of these encounters in our days, in our lives, the better we feel physically and emotionally. Bell Hooks was an amazing American professor, feminist, and social activist, said that we never heal in isolation, that healing is an act of communion, an act of love. She refers to love not as this abstract, mysterious feeling, but she talks about love as a way of being as a practice that is based on care, affection, trust, responsibility, and commitment to one another. I believe that love described in this way can be a very beautiful and also very useful framework for, well, for any work done in any space really, but particularly, I cannot imagine a care institution wanting to work under any other umbrella than the one of love. In recent years, I've been trying to create and to find opportunities for dialogue in aged care, which, as some of you may know, is currently facing significant challenges. These include funding constraints, staff shortages, quality of care issues, social isolation, systematic racism and abuse, and unhappiness amongst residents and staff. Research indicates that 52% of aged care residents suffer from depression, and it suggests that it may be in part due to caregivers' inadequate understanding of residents' needs. And this statement is not saying that it's caregivers' fault, because of course it is not. What it's suggesting is that there is a disconnection, miscommunication, and little understanding between the two groups. And several factors contribute to this situation. Limited time for interaction, including limited cultural barriers, language, insufficient training, and staff burnout. There is an entire body of knowledge coming from the medical humanities that is looking at this problem, and it's suggesting or proposing storytelling as a part of the solution. Rita Sharon, who is one of the leading figures in this movement, describes it as a care model that is radically listening to patient stories as a means of rehumanizing and personalizing care. This area of research is known as narrative medicine and has been growing and evolving in the West in the last 20 years. Of course, in other countries, like in Aboriginal countries, in Australia, and in other areas in the world, listening to stories has always been central to care. I'm going to share here a personal note. When I talked to my mom, who is based in Mexico, when I talked to my mom about my research, many times she has this very fiery reaction, questioning me why is it that I need to prove something that is so evident and almost indisputable. And I think she's right, but we need to validate these ideas because we're working under the structures of colonial bureaucracy, and bringing change to such a rigid system like aged care requires a lot of effort and practice and convincing. I want to invite you to imagine an aged care system that is radically listening not just to residents, but also to caregivers. So my work investigates how to do this. And I agree with Rita Sharon and with other scholars that storytelling is ideal for bringing people together. But I guess the question here is how do we create safe spaces for dialogue in aged care? How do we write stories? Who writes them and who tells them? And what do we do with them? We have the stories, and then what do you do with them? How do we do it efficiently and from a place of love? So from a place of care, affection, trust, responsibility, and commitment. I want to show you some of the work that I've done. You an example of what our practice has to offer to this very specific area of research. So I'm going to share my screen now. I'm coming. Can you see that?
Yes.
Can you still see that?
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Yes, please.
I think there's a microphone on. So this is a publication called I Am Here, which I produced, printed and published in collaboration with Visual Studies Workshop, which is an art college, publishing house, and a research center based in New York. So this first volume shows my conversations with Esta Siviani, who was an amazing, beautiful, resilient, strong woman who I visited for many years prior to this project. In 2020, IMA, which is the Institute of Modern Art based here in Brisbane, approached me to commission me to do some work that showed the experiences of an older person going through the pandemic. So I started visiting Esta in her care facility, and she lived in one of the only care facilities in Brisbane that allowed close family to come in for visits. So I visited her weekly, and we just engaged in many deep conversations about aging and isolation, love, feminism, art, religion, and death. The work uses photography, poetry knowledge, graphic and book devices to convey information to convey information in a way that conventional interviews or written forms would never allow. This is Joan Nolan. She grew up in the bush. She was a feminist, and she was very into politics. She was very sensitive and very, very sharp. Esta and Joan did not know each other, but when I read to Joan Esta's words, this is what Joan said to me. Thank you so much for reading this to me. I like this woman. She inspires me to keep my mind together. So I visited Joan weekly for nearly 2 years. Most of our visits were online due to COVID lockdowns. She was genuinely interested in my life and in my work, and she wanted to talk about things, and she wanted to share her views with other people. So she did. I got to know Joan's story and personality very well, but I also gained a clear insights into her routine, activities, and other details of her life in aged care. And this brought ethical and confidentiality concerns that needed to be discussed. An essential part of my work is the ongoing consent and consultation process. So for example, with Joan, I used to reintroduce myself every time I see her. I reintroduce her to the work. I explained what we have done so far. I explained what we were envisioning. And I asked her if she was still interested in publishing the work every time. This was part of the routine. I'm going to play this video.
On the video, Anna?
Sorry?
There's no sound on the video.
Oh. Can you hear there?
No.
Okay, I'm gonna stop it then. Just bear with me for a second. Well, basically, I'm reading her own words, and there's a moment where she asked me if I could repeat it, and this is just for me to illustrate how we work together a lot on editing the work. And so yeah, so we had enough time to review the work together and select. And she also helped me selecting the behind the scenes material that I could share with the public, as this video that I'm just playing. So the second volume, which is Joan's story, was launched in her care home. And the books were distributed and placed in many common areas in her home, in the facility. The staff stopped me many times in the hallways to comment on the work and to share experiences on their own that related to Joan. There was this particular carer who stopped me to say that she couldn't believe that Joan had those experiences, and she had been looking after her for more than 10 years, and she was very surprised to hear part of the story. The feedback in the homes was very positive, and I'm going to just leave this for a second so you can read it before I move on to the next project. Is that enough time? Okay, I'm going to stop that now. All this time working in aged care as an artist, but also as an employee, provided me with a profound understanding of the complexities within the system. I became very aware of the demanding working conditions faced by caregivers. Understanding this deeply was a turning point in my thinking, but also in my work. I think my attention has shifted from mainly concentrating on advocating for residents to also including caregivers. I think I actually feel ashamed that it took me a while to see it. Like I think of not having considered it before. It took me a while to actually see the layers of the complexity and see the whole picture. It became very evident that the solutions in aged care may not lie on a person-centered care model, but on a relationship-centered one. As part of my work as an employee, I worked very closely with residents and carers, and I was involved in all areas of the service delivery. And I initiated with a lot of help from caregivers and volunteers, many amazing projects that allowed and invited people to get together. I don't have enough time to share those projects, but I want to just talk about one specific thing that happened. There was this carer called Rosie, and she's aware, and she allowed me to talk about this today. She had been working at this facility for about 10 years. She came to see me because she was very unhappy and she was about to quit her role. So she came on a Friday afternoon. She was about to just leave. And I asked her to give me the weekend just to think about a possible solution. So on Monday, when I came back to work, I found her and I proposed her if she wanted to write stories. I said to her, what if you take 2 hours of your shift to write stories, to meet with residents and just write? And she laughed, and she had this one. She's like, of course not. I can't do that. I'm a creative. I'm not creative. I can't do it. But of course, it was not better. Took on the offer. I didn't tell her exactly how to do stories because there is no real recipe to follow, as when we're working on a context and with people and it's constantly changing. But I shared with her some of the questioning that is required for doing this type of work. And Rosie faced similar concerns of those that I have dealt with for many years. So how do you approach a person? How do you initiate a conversation about writing their stories? How do you work with individuals who have dementia? How do you write their stories and find meaning in them? How do you manage your own emotions when working on the story of someone who's in a lot of pain or who's dying? or who passes away during the writing process? How do you look after yourself in the process? How do you ensure that your approach is respectful and responsible? And then finally, what do you do with the stories? How do you reach your audience? And also, you need to find out who is your audience. So we discussed and answered all of these questions together, kind of like on the go. And we came up with a production plan that worked well. I believe that writing stories helped Rosie to reframe the purpose of her work. Like, we saw her changing, and I'm not exaggerating. She moved from like coming in, dragging her feet, to coming in, skipping and smiling and humming, and she was completely transformed. We received not just that, like, we also received great feedback from people in her area, so from residents and carers who were working on her floor. So the question here was, if I'm burnt out and miserable in my job, how am I going to be able to contribute to a community of compassion and care? And I think creative work can help people to turn things around. So eventually we included other carers and volunteers to work on stories as well. There's this other story where I go into the lift and there's a housekeeper that comes in after me, and he whispered to me something like, "Oh, I heard that you are that you have opportunities for writing," but the way he said it, I felt like I was almost like the dodgy Mexican dealing with illegal creativity or illegal happiness. So yeah, so other people got involved, and the nurses started to use these stories for when working on care plans. And of course, like, this is not a new idea. Currently, most aged care facilities are collecting residents' background stories during their admission processes, like, which means that they are already aware of the potential. However, is the way we do it what we need to pay attention on. Yes and no questions and checklists and forms are not good enough for giving people space to really say who they are. And also that process misses out the opportunity of the exchange, which is when when important things are conveyed and understood. Okay, now I'm just gonna conclude with final thoughts. So the work that I've done with residents and carers around storytelling in the last few years has been transformational. And I'm not talking about big changes. It's more about the fractals, like the changes that happened at a very small scale that connect to the bigger scales. We learned together how to talk about love, grief, abuse, trauma, and many other things. And having this shared vocabulary opens space for change, real change that happens like from within. I understood deeply what Bell Hooks says about healing in communion. We do heal in communion, but many times institutions like aged care take away our social fabric. So we must work together on bringing our ideas and our skills and our personal power to reweave it. Our aged care institutions are difficult spaces. I have learned that it is not easy for residents and caregivers to find their voices in the industry. It's hard, but I've also seen the benefits that come from when they do. I've seen the benefits of using tools that come from socially engaged art practice and theory, and it's very straightforward. Like, the benefits just show themselves so clearly. But of course, it's not as easy as, okay, sure, let's do stories. We need frameworks. We need to learn how to do this work ethically, responsibly, and efficiently. And we are desperate for help. Like, we need a lot of help to be able to achieve this. And I think that's all I want to share today. I enjoyed talking. I hope that came across clearly, and thank you so much for listening.
That was so wonderful, Anna. I just love to hear about your work, and I was happy to hear about it again. We had a little bit of trouble with the connection, so I'm going to ask you, we'll still do our Q&A now, but ask you to record it at a later stage, the exact thing you just said, so that we've got a better
Okay.
quality.
Sure.
Yeah, just exactly like that. Don't change a thing.
Okay.
I'm going to stop recording.